NM cable is approved for use in 1 and 2 family dwellings according to the 2020 National Electrical Code. It's important to understand what constitutes a 1 or 2 family dwelling in this context. Essentially, these are structures designed for 1 or 2 independent living units. The code distinguishes these from multifamily dwellings. Multifamily dwellings, as defined by the NEC, are buildings that contain 3 or more dwelling units. The rules regarding NM cable usage differ significantly between these types of structures. Specifically, NM cable is not generally approved for use in multifamily dwellings. There is an exception, however. If the multifamily dwelling is constructed as a Type 3, Type 4, or Type 5 building, NM cable use may be permitted. These construction types generally refer to buildings with varying degrees of fire resistance, with Type 3 allowing for combustible exterior walls, and Types 4 and 5 typically being less fire-resistant construction. Given this distinction, a key question arises: can NM cable be used in a residential detached garage? The answer depends on the type of dwelling the garage serves. If the detached garage is associated with a 1 or 2 family dwelling, then NM cable is generally permitted, provided all other applicable code requirements are met. However, if the detached garage is part of a multifamily dwelling, the situation is different. In this case, NM cable cannot be used unless the garage is located in a Type 3, Type 4, or Type 5 building. This restriction is in place to enhance safety in multifamily dwellings, where a greater number of occupants and shared spaces increase the potential risk in the event of a fire or other electrical hazard. It's crucial to verify the specific construction type of the multifamily dwelling to determine whether the exception applies. The National Electrical Code is very specific in its requirements for electrical installations to ensure safety. One key aspect is the type of wiring methods permitted in different types of buildings. NM, or non-metallic sheathed cable, is commonly used in residential wiring, but its use is subject to certain limitations, particularly in multifamily dwellings and other types of construction. It's important to consult the NEC directly, specifically Article 334, for the complete requirements and any applicable exceptions. Now, let's address the issue of thermal barriers. The question often arises whether a thermal barrier is required for NM cable in residential detached garages. According to the NEC, a thermal barrier of material with at least a 15-minute finish rating is not generally required for NM cable in residential detached garages. This means that under normal circumstances, you do not need to cover the NM cable with a fire-rated material to protect it. However, there are some exceptions to this rule. For example, if the garage is attached to a dwelling, or if the local building codes have more stringent requirements. It's always essential to consult with the local authority having jurisdiction, or OJ, to ensure compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. The AHJ is the local authority responsible for enforcing the electrical code, and they may have specific requirements that go beyond the NEC. It's also important to consider the specific installation conditions. Even if a thermal barrier is not required by the NEC, it may be a good idea to install one in certain situations to provide additional protection for the NM cable. For example, if the cable is exposed to physical damage, or if it is located in an area where it could be exposed to high temperatures, a thermal barrier could help to prevent damage to the cable and reduce the risk of fire. In summary, NM cable is generally permitted in residential detached garages that are part of 1 and 2 family dwellings, but not in multifamily dwellings unless the building is of Type 3, Type 4, or Type 5 construction. A thermal barrier is typically not required, but it's always best to consult with a local AHJ to ensure compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. The key considerations when determining whether an NM cable can be used in a residential detached garage revolve around the type of dwelling itself and the construction type of the building. For 1 and 2 family dwellings, NM cable is generally permitted, assuming all other code requirements are met. For multifamily dwellings, however, restrictions apply unless the building is of Type 3, Type 4, or Type 5 construction. It is also important to note that the NEC defines a dwelling unit as a single unit providing complete and independent living facilities for 1 or more persons, including permanent provisions for living, sleeping, cooking, and sanitation. This definition is crucial for distinguishing between different types of dwellings and applying the correct code requirements. Therefore, to reiterate, NEC cable is approved for use in 1 and 2 family dwellings in accordance with the 2020 National Electrical Code. It is not specifically approved for use in multifamily dwellings, which are defined as buildings containing 3 or more dwelling units, unless the dwelling unit is located in a Type 3, Type 4, or Type 5 building. Therefore, NEC cable cannot be used in a residential detached garage that is part of a multifamily dwelling unless the garage is located in a Type 3, Type 4, or Type 5 building. The NEC does not require a thermal barrier of material that has at least a 15-minute finish rating for NEC cable in residential detached garages. Let's consider some examples to illustrate these rules. Imagine a single-family home with a detached garage. In this case, NEC cable can generally be used to wire the garage, assuming all other applicable code requirements are met. Now imagine a duplex with a detached garage that serves both units. Again, NEC cable can typically be used, as the structure is considered a 2-family dwelling. However, if we have an apartment building with multiple units and a detached garage, NEC cable cannot be used in the garage unless the apartment building is of Type 3, Type 4, or Type 5 construction. In addition to the type of dwelling, it's also important to consider the specific insulation requirements for NEC cable. The NEC specifies how NEC cable must be supported, protected, and terminated. For example, NEC cable must be supported at intervals not exceeding 4.5 feet and must be protected from physical damage. It's also important to use the correct type of connectors and fittings when terminating NEC cable. Failure to follow these installation requirements can result in code violations and increase the risk of electrical hazards. Let's delve a little deeper into the different types of building construction as defined by the NEC. Type 1 and Type 2 construction are the most fire-resistant types, typically used for high-rise buildings and other structures where fire safety is paramount. These types of construction require non-combustible materials for all structural elements. Type 3 construction allows for combustible exterior walls, but requires fire-resistant materials for interior structural elements. Type 4 construction, also known as heavy timber construction, uses large dimension wood members for structural elements. Type 5 construction is the least fire-resistant type, allowing for combustible materials for all structural elements. The NEC restrictions on NEC cable use in multifamily dwellings are primarily intended to address fire safety concerns. In the event of a fire, NEC cable can melt and release toxic fumes, which can pose a significant hazard to occupants. By limiting the use of NEC cable in multifamily dwellings, the NEC aims to reduce the risk of fire and improve the safety of these buildings. It's important to remember that the NEC is a minimum standard for electrical safety. Local building codes may have more stringent requirements. Always consult with the local AHA to ensure compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. The AHA is responsible for interpreting and enforcing the electrical code, and they can provide guidance on specific installation requirements. In addition to the NEC and local building codes, there may be other regulations that apply to electrical installations in residential detached garages. For example, some jurisdictions may require permits for electrical work, and others may have specific requirements for grounding and bonding. It's essential to research all applicable regulations before starting any electrical work. Now let's consider some common mistakes that people make when installing NEC cable in residential detached garages. One common mistake is using the wrong size of cable. The size of the cable must be appropriate for the load it will be carrying. Using a cable that is too small can result in overheating and fire. Another common mistake is failing to properly support the cable. NEC cable must be supported at intervals not exceeding 4.5 feet. Failure to support the cable properly can result in damage to the cable and increase the risk of electrical hazards. Another mistake is using the wrong type of connectors and fittings. It's important to use connectors and fittings that are specifically designed for use with NEC cable. Using the wrong type of connectors and fittings can result in a poor connection and increase the risk of electrical hazards. Another common mistake is failing to properly ground and bond the electrical system. Grounding and bonding are essential for electrical safety. Failure to properly ground and bond the system can result in electrical shock and fire. Finally, another common mistake is failing to consult with a qualified electrician. Electrical work can be dangerous. If you are not comfortable working with electricity, it's best to consult with a qualified electrician. A qualified electrician can ensure that the electrical system is installed safely and in compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. Let's consider some additional factors that can affect the use of NM cable in residential detached garages. One factor is the presence of moisture. If the garage is damp or humid, it's important to use a type of NM cable that is rated for wet locations. Another factor is the presence of chemicals. If the garage is used to store chemicals, it's important to use a type of NM cable that is resistant to chemical exposure. Another factor is the presence of rodents. Rodents can chew on NM cable, which can damage the cable and increase the risk of electrical hazards. If rodents are a problem, it's important to protect the NM cable with conduit or other protective measures. In addition to these factors, it's also important to consider the aesthetic appearance of the electrical installation. While safety is the primary concern, it's also desirable to have an electrical installation that is neat and professional looking. This can be achieved by carefully planning the installation and using high-quality materials and workmanship. Finally, it's important to remember that the electrical code is constantly evolving. The NEC is updated every 3 years, and local building codes may also be updated periodically. It's essential to stay up to date in the latest code requirements to ensure that your electrical installations are safe and compliant. Let's talk more about thermal barriers. While the NEC doesn't typically require a 15-minute thermal barrier for an NM cable in detached garages, there might be situations where adding one is a good idea. For example, if the garage is used for woodworking or other activities that generate a lot of heat, a thermal barrier could help protect the NM cable from overheating. Similarly, if the garage is located in a very hot climate, a thermal barrier could help extend the life of the NM cable. Thermal barriers can be made from various materials, including gypsum board, mineral wool, and spray-applied fire-resistant materials. The specific type of material will depend on the application and the desired level of fire protection. If you're considering adding a thermal barrier, it's important to consult with a qualified electrician or building professional to determine the best material and installation method. Remember, the goal is to provide an extra layer of protection without creating any new hazards. It's also important to ensure that the thermal barrier is properly installed and doesn't interfere with the normal operation of the electrical system. For example, you don't want to block ventilation or create a fire hazard by using flammable materials. When in doubt, always err on the side of caution and seek professional advice. Understanding the nuances of NM cable use in residential detached garages requires a thorough understanding of the National Electrical Code, local building codes, and specific installation conditions. By following these guidelines and consulting with qualified professionals, you can ensure that your electrical installations are safe, compliant, and reliable.